Was this a flip a coin, heads or tails? What day am I going to kill all the Jews? Or did he have that little thing like the bingo game, and he reached in and picked out a date that he was going to do it? I know on Yom Kippur, it's which goat are we going to sacrifice? So that could be a heads or tails. That's the other day of lots. But how did that work technically with Haman?
It seems that at least when it came to the months, there was like different shards which he drew, and with different names of months from the way the Talmud describes it. But there's also, there's some midrash, because we don't get a clear, on a lot of things, a clear historical record. It's just different. It's traditions, and also with insights with psycho-spiritual insights. One of them is that he would reject some of the months because he saw them as significant, spiritually significant and powerful for the Jewish people, and he believed that there was power on that side. So he rejected some of the ones until it came to Adar, which is the month in which Moses passed away. So that he accepted it, and then when whether the day of the month, it's not clear from the Megillah, and there are different rabbinic perspectives. So, as in many things, I can give you a definite maybe on the details.
Okay, so we have one bowl that has months, and then you had another bowl that had days.
Maybe on the days. Days is not clear.
Okay.
All right.
All right, that works for now.
Or not.
If I have to explain it to somebody, I want to at least be able to come up with some kind of a reasonable.
And you can tell them that your uncertainty has rabbinic certification.
Look, do we stand or sit during the Shema? Right.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So.
Good morning, Mendy.
Good morning, Sherry. Morning, everybody.
That was a very nice Shalach Manis.
Thank you.
Very nice.
These days, I just work here.
But you saw
I'm still putting the puzzle together.
Okay, so I'm going to mute all. Please, just for background noise, please unmute yourself and ask any questions that are necessary for the flow. And larger questions we'll try to leave for the end, although I don't usually get to doing that, so I understand if you think that's a fraud. I'm going to mute all, and I want to get back into the Torah portions. Since the very beginning of the Torah, I think we started with the second Torah portion. I don't remember it clearly. Second Torah portion is Noah, and we've been going week by week through the Torah, doing the coming week. In other words, yesterday we read a Torah portion, but today in Jewish lore, discusses called Yom Rishon, what we call Sunday, is the first day. Yom Rishon means the first day. So this is the first day of the coming week, and therefore, if it's the first day of the coming week, Shabbos, this coming Shabbos, is the final day of the coming week, and it's really building up to a crescendo for the Torah portion that we're going to read in the coming week. And therefore, in the email that I send out every Friday, which I probably don't read anymore, because I don't, it's really about setting a tone for the week that we live with the coming Torah portion. Because of some things where we needed to kind of supplement the week before, and especially last Sunday, we bumped the whole system to go for Purim. I want to discuss the Torah portion we read yesterday, because I don't want to skip it, and then maybe a little bit of this coming week's. But this coming week's has a narrative, the narrative of the golden calf, which is going to take up a lot of time. And so next week, just to give you my bookkeeping, next week I hope to finish off this coming week's and go into the next ones, which are actually there's very little narrative there, and I think we'll be able to squeeze it all in, and then we'll get back on track the coming week. If that made any sense to you, that's great. You followed along. If not, just let you know I'm worrying about this. We're not going to skip anything, and I'm trying to think this through. Okay, so in the Torah portions where we're holding, what we read yesterday, which we have not yet discussed, we had been reading for the first book of the Torah and the first part of the second book of the Torah, a narrative. It sounded, there's a lot of Torah direction, and obviously it's Torah, it's not just history, it's not just stories for sure, it's not even only history, it's history that the Torah, the God sees relevant to us for our daily lives. But it was, well, it's framed in historical narrative. Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham and Sarah, going through the generations, the first book of the Torah, then Jews go down to Egypt, to slavery, the whole Passover narrative. That we went through all of that. They come to Sinai. Now, Sinai, and this is relevant to what I want to say, Sinai is an intensely spiritual experience. The Jews are standing there. Not only are they feeling deep connection with each other, they're perceiving their relationship with God, which we can miss, and they look at the world differently. They see the meaning of the world. They see the purpose of the world. This was not, standing at Sinai, they didn't have any moral struggles about whether to do something meaningful and substantive or not, because they're looking meaning, godliness, the purpose of their souls, the purpose of their lives, they're looking that in the face. A very intensely spiritual holy moment, which really happened only once in history. In the narrative, which we haven't fully fleshed out yet, because the Torah doesn't go in total chronological order sometimes, after 40 days on Sinai, the golden calf, things we're going to talk about next week, the Jews they go from this deep connection to a sense of disconnect. Then they try to reconnect, what we call in Hebrew teshuvah, realignment, return, and that and God grants that and says, okay, I'm going to give you a second set of tablets, because Moses smashed the first when he saw the golden calf, them worshiping the golden calf, and Moses comes back down on Yom Kippur, the 10th day of Tishrei. It's not yet Yom Kippur, but it's a day of atonement, of realignment, of a second chance. Comes down with the second tablets. We discussed this in previous weeks. The day after that, God tells them that they should build a tabernacle. Now, building the tabernacle is, in a sense, an opportunity for the Jews going forward in history to recreate the spiritual intimacy that they felt at Sinai. That's part of the message there. I'm giving you this gift because we had the spiritual intimacy. You breached it. I'm giving you another chance. But I'm giving you another chance to feel me and to be able to see, to have holy moments, and be able to see the world accurately, see yourselves accurately, be able to guide your lives accurately. And that will be, in a sense of, I'm giving you a spiritual environment called the tabernacle, which is eventually the temple. In some sense, that's what's supposed to be in a synagogue. The temple, the Beis Hamikdash, was destroyed 2,000 years ago. But the Talmud calls our synagogues a mikdash ma'at, a mini temple, a mini holy temple. That's what it's supposed to be. The building doesn't do it. It's a do it alone. It's an environment in which we can create. Now, in that temple, which was the last Torah portion we spoke about, and it wasn't a temple then, it was a portable sanctuary that we call the tabernacle, the Mishkan in Hebrew. Mishkan meaning that's where God dwells, and through that God dwells in us. Obviously, it's not all physical and spatial. In that, we spoke about the setup of the tabernacle and the religious or holy artifacts, I guess, are tools that went into it. This next Torah portion we read yesterday around the world in synagogues, it speaks about the functionaries in the tabernacle. We're known as the Kohen and the Levite. Now, just for the clarity of it, Jacob and his wives have had 12 sons. One of them is Levi, and the descendants are called Levites. That's an English thing, but Levi, that's descended. They are, even back in Egypt during slavery, they were the more spiritual, moral guides of the Jewish people, and they were like the priests. And we're told in our tradition that actually the Egyptians respected the fact that we had priests, and they didn't get the brunt of the slavery because they were more the spiritual class. And a subset of that tribe, the Levites, are become, as we're going to see now, become called Kohens. The Levites have a sense of commitment to the divine and to serving the divine, and kicking that up, what we call priests, a Kohen, is even more. That's the top of the heap as far as this idea of spiritual commitment. So I want to talk about that for a second. The Kohen, today we don't have a temple, and the Kohen really doesn't have much of a function except for partaking in blessing the congregation on holidays. Actually in Jerusalem, it's every day, but in most of the world, it's just on holidays. There's a blessing which is not in this week's Torah portion. We'll get to that in June if we're still zooming then. It's a blessing that they give to the Jewish people. Now, it's not about their blessing. It's not so much about that we say the Kohen somehow has necessarily a more spiritual achievement than I do just because they're a Kohen, or than you do. It doesn't mean that. It means that they're more spiritually inclined. They're designed to be able to be a conduit in human form for God's blessing. So really, we respect that their soul type has been designed by God to be a channel for blessing to us. So in one sense, they are servants of the people. It's really about us, living life and being able to draw godliness into us. And in Torah thinking, even standing at Sinai, where they had this intensely spiritual, wonderful, experience that we could long for, that's not really, the Torah doesn't design in any way, doesn't design that type, or doesn't describe that type of an experience as being the goal of life. The goal of life is pretty much what we're doing right now. To some extent, it's taking time on a Sunday morning to get our heads straight, try to tap into the wisdom of the ages and what God wants, and then go back to life and try to guide life in a meaningful way. That's where the action is. That's where the Torah action is. So the Torah that we got at Sinai does not encourage us to detach from the physical world and focus on the spiritual. Not at all. It says, it encourages us to tap into spirituality when we can, and hopefully daily or thrice daily, and then engage the material world and make a difference. It's about what we're doing on the ground in making good choices in the world. It's not about spending our entire day in a synagogue, in a class, or in the temple of old. So that's not normal. It's not what the Kohen did was not normal. The Kohens were wholly committed, WHO, wholly committed to divine service. And they were supported by the community, because if they're wholly committed to divine service, how are they going to pay their bills? How are they going to feed their families? So they were wholly committed to the divine, which is an outlier. That's not normal Jewish behavior. But it was because we, as a people, we needed human beings to be able to provide us, to help inspire us, help guide us, do the service for us, because we're all doing our business, and the temple the temple service needs to go on. So they are, on the one hand, if there was a temple now, we could be sitting together and saying, look, it's so beautiful. Spirituality is so beautiful. Being cocooned in spirituality is so beautiful. Imagine if we could sit in the temple all day and feel God's presence and feel the holiness. It's, we yearn for that. Yes, and that's why we would be looking up to those people. And we're giving them a tithe, and we are respecting the fact that these people embody spiritual connectedness. So at one level, we are esteeming them. The other level, we also know that they are servants of the people. The only reason that they need to do this is because they need to be channels for us. They are a means to an end, and the end is how we deal with the cashier and ShopRite, how we talk to our coworkers, how we treat our family. That's really what it's about. The end game of Torah is not all about someone sitting in the spiritual atmosphere in the temple. It's the spiritual atmosphere in the temple is in the service of. So there are these two poles that are pretty consistent in Torah thinking: the yearning for intense spirituality, and then the recognition that that's great. I have it. I feel it. I want to draw inspiration from it. Now I got to take it into real life. So Torah life is not about Shabbos. Shabbos is ideally it's a day of spirituality and focus and introspection and connection and trying to strengthen our relationships, our relationship with ourselves and with our loved ones, with God. And that's great, and it's beautiful. We call Shabbos Kodesh, the Holy Shabbos, and we think about it every day. We talk about, the Shabbos is coming. But Shabbos, in a certain way, is really just in the service of Sunday and Monday and Tuesday, because the action in the world, the shifts we're making in the world, the impact we're making in the world is not so much on Shabbos, because we're leaving the world alone on Shabbos. Now we're turned to our inner world on Shabbos. But what about making the world different? That happens Sunday through Friday. So each one has an advantage. Each one is necessary in these two poles, the more spiritual and the physical engagement. If we're too into the physical engagement, we're not gonna have our sharp compass. If we're too into the spiritual cocoon, we're gonna feel good. We're not gonna get anything done. So there has to be a balance. And this is part of the balance Torah-wise, where God is saying after what happened at Sinai, I'm giving you this very spiritual anchor. So you have this in order to be able to fuel your meaningful life in the field, whatever you're doing. Here they're in the desert, but going forward, there'll be many of them are going to be farmers. So this Torah portion talks about it's unpacking the tabernacle idea, but talking about the functionaries, and those functionaries are ones we look up to very much. But they are conduits and in the service of bringing inspiration to the people. Now, before this Torah portion gets into it, and it's just, I just want to point out, in case you look in the Torah, literarily, I guess you say, from a literary sense, this week's Torah portion has two things that are kind of disjointed. It would be very neat if the last Torah portion spoke all about the structure and the physical objects inside, and the next one talks about the functionaries, which is the way I just presented it. It makes sense. There's actually, in the beginning of this Torah portion, and at the end of this Torah portion, we kind of refer back to some of the holy physical articles in the tabernacle. I don't know if I'm going to have time to discuss the different meanings that are read into it. I'm just throwing it out there in case you do open it up and you look at it and you say, this is not what Mendy said. He said it talked all about the Kohen. We're going to be talking here now about the oil for the Menorah. I get it, I know, but it has been noticed, and maybe we'll be able to bring it up later. Now, the Torah portion does begin with the idea of the oil for the candelabra. Last week's Torah portion, we spoke about what we read last week, discussed last week, but what we read last week is about the candelabra that was in the temple. It was a 7-branch candelabra, 6 and then 1 in the center. A golden candelabra, which was a holy article. And here, this week's Torah portion begins with the oil that's needed for the lights. And just briefly, the oil is on the functional end, it's olive oil. And the Torah makes it clear that it should be without sediment, and it's like hand pressed, hand crushed, so there's no sediment. So in Torah wisdom, the Talmud and so on, it's not so much like everything else, not explicitly in the scripture. There's a lot of focus on olive oil and its use ritually. There's actually, Talmudically, I'm just throwing this out there for our own little information base, 9 different gradations of olive oil that the Talmud talks about, as far difference in when there were several harvests, where it was harvested, where on the tree the olive grew, its exposure to the sun, and how it was crushed. Machinery was the first press, second press, third press, fourth press. So this oil had to be the top of the line oil, as clear as possible. It is seen Talmudically. Olive oil is seen as the most elegant, or I guess clear light when it comes to creating fire. Even though around the world, including in my house, it is traditional on Shabbos to use candles, in the times of the Talmud, it was advocated that you use olive oil lamps. And that's found in the Talmud, partially because of this, because it's considered a better light. For Hanukkah, we still only use olive oil, at least in my house. In certain communities, obviously the candles are fine, but this is there's something about olive oil. And I think I just I can't remember, but I think we discussed the menorah 2 weeks ago. I don't want to get back into it because there's a lot more to get. One of the things that it says in the beginning of the Torah portion is that the menorah needs to be lit, in the tabernacle needs to be lit perpetually. Now, what does that mean? And there's a debate as to what actually happened, because the thinking from the way the Torah describes it, it seems that it was lit at night, which would make sense. It's at night and it's spreading light to the world. They didn't need it for inside the temple or the tabernacle. There was plenty of light from other sources, but this was the idea of spreading light in a dark world. So it would be, then perpetually would mean that every single night, without fail, there had to be the menorah lit. And that's even, Shabbos and Kippur, whatever, always lit. There are many authorities, including Maimonides, who will write that actually it remained lit all day. But in the morning, during the day, only one candle was lit, the Western candle. It was placed from east to west. So on the western side, which exactly of the western is split 4-4 and 3-3 and 1 in the middle. So which of those 3 is its own debate, but on the western side, and that was called a ner tamid, perpetual light. So for those of you who are familiar, there in many synagogues is something called a ner tamid, perpetual light, and that is where it's mimicking. It's a modeling is this idea that there was during the day, even during the day, this one candle on the western side, because the western side was closer to the tabernacle, to the ark. So there will be this perpetual light. Now, some communities don't have a Ner Tamid in a synagogue because we're not supposed to actually actively model the temple. It's its own conversation, but I think the Ner Tamid concept, perpetual light concept, is pretty well known, pretty widespread in Jewish synagogue life. Let's see the timing here. Here, the Torah portion begins with the words, and you, meaning Moses, should command the Jewish people about the proper usage of the tabernacle and the oil. So you as a pronoun is referring to Moses, and clearly Moses is directly a prominent part of whatever's going on in this temple, this Torah portion, because he's being spoken to and he's conveying it to us. But it happens to be the only Torah portion in the Torah. Once Moses is introduced, there's only one Torah portion where his name does not appear. And that's this Torah portion that we read yesterday does not have Moses' name at all. Even though he appears in a pronoun, but his name does not appear. And there are a lot of different angles on what we learn from it. One of the things which I think just relevant, I like to give as much as we can for take-home mindset, is that what we're going to read in the next Torah portion, in other words, this coming Shabbos, but and hopefully we'll discuss it next Sunday, is that when God expressed this deep dissatisfaction with the Jews creating the golden calf and worshiping the golden calf, and when Moses pushed back, because God says, enough of these people, and I'm just going to get rid of them, and we'll build a new nation from you. And what Moses says is that that he's not going to accept that, and if you're not, what he says is, if you will not forgive them, erase me from your book, which is beautiful. You look at a leader standing up for his people, it's a beautiful insight into what we call leadership. But he does say this, erase me from your book. Now, there is a Talmudic idea, which I think is relevant to us. We're very careful about what we say. The Rebbe was very, very careful about not using harsh or negative language, even if he was talking about something which things, sometimes you gotta say something that isn't pleasant because you have to call it. Very, very careful about not using harsh language, of cursing and so on. So, and that's a Torah value. So one of the things that the Talmud says is that it tells us, even in words, not to curse anyone, not to curse ourselves, because words mean things. In our normal mindset, word's a word. We were just talking before got on. We're talking about the old days when you could do a business deal in a handshake. Okay, even then it wasn't just a word; it was a handshake. But a handshake today, what are you going to go take that to court? You have to have everything, a proper document, notarized and triplicate, and then you might be okay. A word doesn't mean anything. Even when we think, it doesn't mean anything. A word is just a word. It's not substantive. In Torah thinking, a word is substantive, in the sense that we've committed ourselves to something. God knows. We know. It may not, even in Jewish life, it may not hold up in court, but in the spiritual dynamics, it means something. If I said something to you, if I promised you something, and there were no witnesses around, you might not be able to get that out of me in court, in Torah court, because it's my word against your word if I'm denying it, but I'm responsible to God. I bound myself to something. And that's real. It's real in a spiritual sense. And because we can't see the spirituality, we may say, it's nothing, sticks and stones, may break my bones, doesn't mean the names don't mean anything, whatever, but it does mean something. So what the Talmud says is that when Moses, in really doing a beautiful thing, standing up for the Jewish people, he says, he curses himself conditionally. He says, if to God, if you don't forgive them, erase me from your book. Well, God does forgive them. So we're all good. But the Talmud says God is teaching him and us, Moses and us, that even saying something like that, there's a residual, conditional, and the condition didn't pan out. Saying something negative, it has a subtle spiritual residual effect, so that this Torah portion, which falls always around the time of Moses' birthday and Yartzeit, this Torah portion doesn't have his name. In other words, God says, you were quick to say, erase me from your book. I'm going to erase you from one Torah portion, just as a testament or a remembrance for your willingness to be out of it. Just the idea of, in I don't know if it's not in Jewish community so much, but just in normal, in society at large. So when I was growing up, a person says, swear, I hope to die, whatever. We don't do that. We're careful with our words. Okay. Now, the Torah portion then goes into the Kohen, the priest, and the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who's really seen as the highest spiritual functionary in the Jewish people, and that lasts for many centuries until into the Common Era, actually. So I am going to try to share a screen. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think it's going to work now. 1 second. Share. Okay, so I think you can see, from my end, I think you can see this. I only found this in Hebrew, so I apologize. I wish it was in English. This is something of a mock-up of how the high priest would be dressed. Now, the Torah describes 4 garments for all the priests, and an extra 4, 8 in total, for the high priest. And I don't know if you can see my cursor here. You can? Okay. Thanks, Shari. So the hat, in Hebrew, it's called the mitznefet. There was a hat also for the regular priest. Was shaped a little differently. This is kind of majestic here. This yellow thing here is called a tzitz. Similar to tzitzits. I can explain why the etymology of that. A tzitz is like a head plate. It was a golden plate, and it was on his forehead, and it said, "Holy to God." It was a solid gold engraved, and with a band, a band of special blue dyed material. Now, this little black thing is actually tefillin, which has nothing to do specifically with the high priest, but the people used to wear tefillin every day, all day, except for Shabbos, all day. So they show him with tefillin, because unless it was on Shabbos or a holiday, he was doing his work in the temple with his tefillin on. This breastplate, which we'll talk about soon, this is called the Hoshan Mishpat. Hoshan Mishpat means the plate, the breastplate. Mishpat means of judgment. Okay, it was a plate of judgment. I'll explain to you why that is. The area of the Code of Jewish Law. Code of Jewish Law is split into 4 sections, and one section is civil law, damages, business, and so on. That section is known as Hoshan Mishpat. After this, the idea of judgment, but I'll get to that in a minute. There was this a robe. It's just the white. It's being covered, but it's this is one that everyone would wear, this white robe, but it's covered by this blue thing, which is called a me'il, which is a robe that was exclusive to this majestic blue, exclusive to the Kohen Gadol. Now, then there's this apron, and the apron is called the ephod, also exclusive to the Kohen Gadol. It's to the high priest. This week's Torah portion actually begins, and once it gets past the oil in the menorah, it goes straight into the ephod. And the ephod would be around the back. There would be straps, and over here, the straps would come over the shoulders, and they would hold on. They would fasten the breastplates was fastened to them. So this ephod, this half apron, this half apron had straps up the back, and they were fastened to this. At the very top, which you can't see here, there were two precious stones, and they had the names of the 12 tribes engraved on them. And I'm going to get to that in a second. I think we did everything. Oh, and then there was like pants, which we really can't see here, which which all of them, all Kohens had, and there's a belt called an avnet. Now this, you see, there's 12 stones, 3 rows of 4. So that, on the face of it, they each of the stones had one of the tribes' names engraved in it. Again, Jacob and his wives had 12 sons. Each of them is a tribe. They're all there. On this, it's for those who are keeping track of all this, Joseph ends up being split into 2 of his kids, Menashe and Ephraim. There isn't a tribe of Joseph per se, but on this, he appears as Joseph. Now, there are different stones, and they are described in the Torah. And the problem we have when it comes to this, or animals described in the Torah, is we're not 100% sure how they translate into our English, or zoologically, or in this case, gemologically. It's really it's its own field of study that we can't know for sure about a lot of these stones, except for things Talmudically that hint that that refer to something, maybe a color or whatever. So we try to figure out what those Hebrew words mean here. And then, not in this week's Torah portion, but I think since we're getting into this, these colors would later be reflected on banners. When the Jews traveled in the desert, they traveled in formation by tribe, the tabernacle in the middle, and each of the tribes had their own flag, their own banner. So it was a formation, which the Torah describes later. We'll get into that also, like June or so, of how they traveled in the desert and the types of banner that they had. I'm just going to go through, at least as far as we know, with the translation, a little bit of how it went, and including the banners, not only what it says in the 6th Torah portion about the Kohen Gadol and what he wore, but just in general how the tribes presented themselves. And I've seen there's a very well-respected commentary in the Torah called Me'am Loes, written by a rabbi in the 1700s named Rabbi Yaakov Kuli, who was in Constantinople, and he was a great Torah scholar. And when he came to Constantinople, he saw that there were an engaged Jewish community, but they weren't that scholarly, and they really didn't. they were not in the rhythm of regular Torah study, not even recognizing what the Torah portion was that week. So he wrote in Ladino, because that was the commonly known language. It's like a Spanish version of Yiddish, I guess. He wrote in Ladino a large set of books. He actually passed away in middle, but his students picked up on it, and it's called Me'am Loes. And he writes that the practice of nations having a national flag began with the Jews in the desert having banners for each individual tribe. So I want to just go through. So the first of the tribes is Reuben. It was, I don't know if this would work. I actually have clearer pictures here, but I just didn't know how to get this onto a shared screen. Maybe I should try this. It'll work. I'm going to stop the share and see if this works. I don't know, does this work for you? Yeah. So that's the, this is a more modern mock-up of it, but see that the first one, it starts from here, and so the first one was ruby. It was a ruby, and the banner was red, and it had a picture of mandrakes. Because there's a story that we went through probably briefly of Reuben bringing mandrakes to his mother Leah. It's beyond this conversation right now. Shimon was I think was emerald, was green, and it had on the flag, the banner, which was a green banner, it had a figure of the city Shechem, because of the story that went on there, where they destroyed Shechem because Dinah was raped. Levi had a tricolor crystal of red, white, and black, and a picture of a breastplate on the banner. Judah had a carbuncle, and the banner, I think, was sky blue, a picture of a lion. Yisachar had, I hope you can hear me, Yisachar had a sapphire, and the banner was dark blue with a sun and a moon on it, because they were astronomers, and the idea of where the Jewish calendar calculations in those times were very, very sophisticated, and they really had to between the mathematics and understanding of the byways of the cosmos. That was more of a Yisachar, tribe of Yisachar forte. Zvulun had a diamond, and it was white, and a picture of a ship because they were merchants. The tribe of Dan had a topaz, and it was a sapphire color, sapphire blue, and it was a picture of a snake. God had it was turquoise and a mixture of black and white, and a picture of an armed camp. Naphtali was something, it might be an amethyst, a picture of a gazelle. Asher is something that we think might be called a chrysolite, picture of an olive tree. Joseph had an onyx and jet black, and also two sub-tribes spelled out on his banner. The picture of the Egyptian capital. And in the banners, Ephraim and Manasseh, his kids, the tribes, each had their own banner, and one had an ox, and Manasseh had an animal called an aurochs, and Benjamin finally had jasper, and all the colors of all the tribes, and the picture of a wolf. Okay, so back to, I'm gonna try this. I think this will be a little easier if I talk with this here. This here, this square was cloth, folded cloth, and you're seeing. So I guess if you look at it, it was cloth folded like this, and here are the stones. But there's something in the fold. There's room in the folds. Now, this was considered almost like an oracle. And in history, we find King David and the Jewish people approaching the high priest. They're not the Jewish people, the leaders of the community. If they had a question of God, how do we respond to the Philistines attacking or whatever, they would approach the high priest, and the high priest would ask the question of God, and the answer would come through these stones. And it seems from the Talmud, there are different opinions, but the letters, different letters would light up and giving him an answer. And we find this really later on in scripture. So this idea of this was we call it the breastplate of judgment, but judgment meaning it's not only judgment like as in a judge deciding a case, but in discerning a way forward. This was a very critical gift to the Jewish people, that God transmitted messages to them through this. Now, in all of these, when it comes to all of these the artifacts in the tabernacle and the clothing of and whatever the Kohen Gadol wears, God says, Moses, make this and make that. This is, you should fashion it. This is how you should fashion it. When it comes to this, it says make the breastplate, and then it says put in the breastplate something called the Urim v'Tumim, the Urim and Tumim. It doesn't say what it is. It doesn't say to create it. It's like it's like he knows what it is. Moses knows what it is. God knows what it is. We haven't been told what it is. We haven't been told to make it. So we're not 100% sure what that is. So there are many authorities who say that this was a piece of paper upon which God's name was written, and it was inserted in the folds. That's probably the most commonly accepted tradition of what Urim v'Tumim means. Urim means light. It would light up. And Tumim means completion, wholeness. I guess of being able to bring some sense of integrity and clarity to the questions we have. So the Kohen Gadol was someone who he represented, he made a clearer connection with God, not only because he was totally committed to godliness, though he needed to be married. So he had a family, but he had committed his life to godliness and to transmitting godliness, and he was actually able to help transmit God's guidance to us. But and there's no but, and that's who he was and how we saw him. Now, in part of that, he was also a Jews. We saw him as not only a figure of inspiration, but really there was a part of us, each of us, that could be a Kohen and could be a Kohen Gadol. And Maimonides writes that. Maimonides writes as a matter of law is that all the things about the Kohen and the Levi are not exclusive. Functionally, they're exclusive. I'm not a Kohen. I can't go into the temple and act like a Kohen. But as far as the spiritual commitment and connectedness, that's not exclusive to a Kohen or a Kohen Gadol. It's really each of us finding that inner, the possibility of finding our inner Kohen and committing to ourselves. So all of we haven't had time to go through it all, but all of the Kohen Gadol's garments and functions, and all the Kohen's garments and functions are not just historical analysis of what happened years ago when there were Kohens who dressed up this way and functioned this way, and it's just chalk it up to understanding how the Jews used to practice. Each of those garments, and all of the practices have relevant spiritual messages and guidance for us. And really, the guidance is to be able to find that Kohen consciousness and the Kohen commitment and the function of each of those ideas within our lives. They say the 8 garments of the Kohen, again, just to throw it out there, they each were seen as helping the Kohen help the Jews find cleansing of mistakes and misdeeds. So if I make a mistake or misdeed, it's up to me to the Kohen can't think for me, and the Kohen can't regret for me. I got to do that work on my own. But then, as far as the spiritual blemish, the Kohen, that God can help me with, and the Kohen helps achieve that. So there are 8 of Kohen garments. They each, well, the way they were seen as helped provide cleansing for specific sins: sexual immorality, pride, evil thoughts, any miscarriage of justice, inclination towards idolatry, malicious speech, arrogance, and any association with bloodshed, which not necessarily means that, because most of us aren't murderers, we don't have to deal with that. But if it's societally, if there's something we are doing or not doing, which it contributes to something where someone actually loses their life, that's something that's on our soul. We don't have to actively murdering someone is one thing, but then being part of a culture where there's an outgrowth, that we participate in that and not even thinking of it that way. So that is for this week's Torah portion. I just want to throw something out for the next week's Torah portion, so that next week we can focus more on the golden calf. This coming week's Torah portion opens up with the mitzvah of a half shekel. The mitzvah of a half shekel was God tells Moses that there's going to be this fund to build the tabernacle, and the tabernacle needs a fund, first of all, to build it, and then to support it. So people could bring whatever they wanted, which is great. And then there was like a flat tax. Everybody, wealthy, poor, everybody brought a half a shekel. And the half shekel is also, again, just for our Jewish knowledge, even though there's the half shekel was practiced for any year that there was the temple was in existence, they needed to fund the public offerings. So this time of year, Adar, the month of Adar, because the calendar year for festivals begins this next month. This next month, in a couple of weeks, is the month of Nisan, and that's what the Torah describes as the beginning of the year. We have Rosh Hashanah as the beginning of the calendar year, but this is the beginning of the year for festivals. So we have 2. It doesn't work in the Western mindset, but in the Jewish mindset, it makes sense. We have 2 beginnings of the year. One for the normal calendar of function, and then spiritually. So the one that the Torah calls, the Torah doesn't call that fall holiday Rosh Hashanah. It calls it the first day of the 7th month. Months begin this coming in 2 weeks. That's the beginning of the new cycle. So this month is the last month of the cycle. So this would be a month of collecting half shekels to fund the coming year's offerings. And that's why when we approach this month, which is called Adar, the Shabbos before, all around the world, you read, after the regular Torah reading, we read the section that the first section of this coming week's Torah portion about the half shekel, even though we're not doing it anymore, but that's what would happen. They would start announcing, and Adar, get your half shekels ready, tax time, we have to fund the offerings. It is practiced also on the day before Purim, which we know as Tanis Esther, the fast of Esther, at the time of the Mincha service, that people give a half shekel, like a 50-cent piece, be able to give to charity. and since it says it 3 times in the Torah, we give 3 of those, or at least $1.50, in remembrance of the half shekels. Not towards offerings, obviously, because we don't do the offerings anymore, but it is in memory of that biblical mitzvah. I would also submit that in the Torah portion, this coming week's Torah portion, when it comes to the half shekel, the Torah says, God describes it as a way of taking a census. So when you count the half shekels, a half shekel was a coin. When you count the half shekels, you know how many people are in amongst the people. And it seems without explanation, it seems pretty quite clear from the Torah that we should not be counting people directly, saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Counting the coins is spiritually safer. We find later on by King David that there was a plague that impacted the people at the time, and it's attributed to the fact that it took a census by counting. So that is still a sensitivity. Some of you may have be familiar with the concept of ayin hara. Ayin hara means an evil eye, or kinahara, however you heard from your grandparents. The ayin hara means that, and kinahara is we're good at just mangling words. Kinahara is it's Cain ayin hara. In Yiddish, that means that may there be no evil eye. Cain means no. Cain ayin hara, so it became kinahara. But the idea is that, and it's not just about counting, it's about how we think. Torah thinking warns against trying to stand out in a crowd. Standing out in a crowd, first of all, can attract jealousy. Try running for office as a way of having everybody find out, what you did wrong in 3rd grade. You stand up, you raise your head above the ground. Somebody's going to try and whack it off. But it's also about this jealousy and negativity. And again, we said before, like with words, we don't want to be the object of someone's negative sentiments, including the jealousy. So there is this idea of not being ostentatious, not flaunting our successes, and the idea of saying 1, 2 means putting focus on this individual. Well, there's safety in blending into a crowd. Now, of course, sometimes we have to stand up and lead. Sometimes we don't have the luxury of just sitting back and saying, I want to blend into the crowd, because we got to make a difference. And that's a good thing. There's a price we pay, because in a way it's safer to just blend in. So the idea is found scripturally, this idea of that the census will be through each people contributing coins and counting the coins, but not counting people directly. So I'll open up for any questions if you like now or not. Yes.
Rabbi?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm thinking the Kohen Gadol is wearing this outfit with all these different elements.
Yeah.
And when he's wearing them, he's alone, right? Meaning there's nobody else with him?
No. He's in the temple, and he's also walking home. What you're probably referring to is that on Yom Kippur, during the service, it was that one day a year, and this one person, a very special time, he would be alone in the Holy of Holies and no one else there. But generally speaking, he was out with other people.
So he's wearing this all the time?
Yeah.
Well,
he deserves a raise, huh?
Oh, yeah. Because I was just thinking, this happened right after God almost destroyed us, right?
Right.
And he's wearing something called, you said it's called a tzitz?
Tzitz, yeah.
It's a tzitzit or it sits. I don't know.
All the tzitz, even the word tzitz, I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, but it probably, the core of it is tzitz is used scripturally to mean like peering out through a crack in the wall or something, peering, or so when something juts out, that's tzitz, it's meitzitz. So the tzitz is kind of, they jut out of my clothing, and this jutted out from his hair, is everything, this kind of stuck out.
Well, because I'm thinking that Jews wear tzitzit to remind us, right, of I guess me not wearing them. I'm not really sure, but I guess God's holiness and the laws, right? So the Kohen Gadol is wearing a tzitz on his forehead saying "Holy to God."
Yeah, and I think part of it is also about, obviously he can't see it, but part of it is this idea that he is holy to God, means that he's totally consecrated and totally committed. So that, so it's kind of like the tzitzit idea of calling attention and focus.
Well, I'm just thinking, because all of this is happening right after God almost wiped us out, the fact that on the breastplate you've got God's laws, which is what's important to him, and our names, which is what's important to us, okay, plus a reminder across his forehead, holy to God, maybe we're sort of reminding God, like, don't wipe us out again. Here's our names, okay, they shouldn't be wiped out, and we are holy to God. What do you think about that?
Works for me.
Okay.
You're looking for a pulpit?
No.
No, that works for me. That's fine. I think that's a fair, it's a fair takeaway. I have there's nothing in what you said or say that that can't be. That's fine. That's good.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the seat and the tzitzi
Yeah.
that are there, are those the same?
No. Tzitzit, again, they sound the same, but because tzitzit are these,
Right.
strings, and a tzitz is this golden plate. But I say linguistically, they seem to come from the same word, which means to kind of jut out.
Well, that's what I was thinking, that it was that the tzitzit comes from, maybe the root is tzit. I don't know.
Tzitzit is used for, we have tzitzit could also mean like locks or extra braids of hair, but that's probably comes more from the fact that we have the tzitzit. It would seem that it's something that juts out is really, that's in Hebrew, and we find that scripturally also, something that, or like a spark is a nitzutz. So it's
Thank you.
And Mendy, I noticed there was no reference to footwear, and I couldn't tell from your picture.
They were barefoot. They were barefoot,
Okay.
and there's stuff that's in that was taken care of to make sure that it was a stone floor, so they had to make sure that there was warmth. That actually works its way into the understandings of what was going on, just trying to keep them warm, but they were barefoot.
Rabbi, I have more general question.
Sure.
Why did God let the Jews be divided in 12 tribes instead of being more of a one people? This typically would be a precursor to some kind of division, and people split up, and as the result, being ruled by somebody else instead of being one tribe fighting together. In Russian history, the Rurik family got divided in a bunch of tribes, and then they got conquered as well. And through history, there are many tribes that happen like that.
And to me, in Russian history, we saw the tragedy would happen when they tried to make everyone the same.
But they didn't. But they never got conquered.
No, I think that and we're going to see this later in the Torah also. I think one of the ideas of Torah is that we are all equally valuable, but we're not all identical, and it's important to be able to achieve a sense of connectedness and oneness that comes from us recognizing what each individual has to contribute to the larger whole. That I don't, and that you don't, or each one of us different what we and appreciating that. So there's a difference between everyone being equally valuable, or just vanilla. And the 12 tribes, it's and we're going to see it later in the Torah also. It's 12 different avenues to life, because we're not all the same, and we shouldn't pretend we're all the same, and we think differently. And for us to be able to come together and each with their own contributions, that's really where the richness is. That's what we could call a tapestry, the Rainbow Coalition. But there isn't an idea of just everyone all one, and that idea comes up a little bit later also. But usually, that's it doesn't work. It's not true. We're not all the same. And again, you know more about Russian history than I do. To me, that what comes up is the facade of oneness that came with communism. I just got a question in here. 1 second. Can you distinguish between the nature of the two nations, one for the Mishkan and one? 1 second. Why am I not? Let me get this chat. For ongoing expenditures. First, God asks, and the second, God commands. So define your question a little bit now. What you're looking at the Torah. What are you saying? What's in the difference? Can you share a little bit how you're?
So can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so on the first one it says "Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Israel," right?
Yeah.
And the second one, he says, "V'ata tetzaveh et bnei Israel v'yikchu elecha shemen zayit v'chol." So it seems like one is the first one. He talks to Moses and he asks him to.
So you're talking about in Tetzaveh? Are you?
Yeah, and
Tetzaveh,
yeah,
right?
that one and the next one.
You're talking about then Kitisa.
Right.
You're comparing the two.
Yeah, I'm comparing Truma and Tetzaveh.
So I'm not sure why I would see that they both seem to be commandments. I don't know, and then I think they're seen that way. Where is?
I don't know.
Oh, you mean in the Truma? One of them is a voluntary thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Oh, because they're two separate. And it kind of goes to what Gennady said before also. Each of us has their own talents, their own assets, their own possibilities, and you cannot legislate that everybody contribute something when not everybody has it. So, but you want to encourage that everybody bring, whether it's their own talents or their own assets and their own skills. That there, God says, everybody from what their heart contributes. In other words, it's your subjective contribution to the community. That's really important to allow for that. But then there's something else. There's an objective, there's something that's an equalizer, that we all contribute the same. Because what happens if there is someone, let's say we're building something in the community, we say it's about time, we need a Jewish center, it's really important, and we want it to be a community effort. And someone, a billionaire, says forward and says, no problem, tell me how much it is, I'll write a check. That's great. But then it's not that much, at least the creation is not so much a community thing. So we say, great, you contribute what you want, but we're going to do something here that's everybody. We want everyone to give a buck. And we're going to put that together, and this is going to be the foundation. Because in this case, actually, the silver of the half shekel did create the sockets that were the foundation of the tabernacle. So there is the opening where a billionaire is writing a big check. That's tzedakah. It's beautiful, and then we should learn from him and give him a big or her a big thank you. But it's the thing is that there's a beauty to having everybody giving the same, and you would tell this billionaire also, you contribute to this fund and only $1. We want everyone the same on this, and then you can give what you want later. That's what's going on here. These two different rhythms of everybody encouraging people to give what they individually can give in some way, shape, or form, and then saying that put that aside. It's not about the individuals, it's about the collective. We all want to be the same on this. We want to be able to have something that represents us all equally.
So one more question. So in Truma, he says that every man would contribute, but in the next Torah portion, it says everyone. It's all men, women, and children, or whatever.
Right. So because there were different charities, and the one that was for everybody was everybody, men, women, children, everybody.
And who does ish mean? What does he mean by ish? Called ish?
In the first one, that means because especially in that society, was a man who was the head of a household and then was cutting the check. So that was the individual, the individual contribution to say everybody. For every man who wants to give, this is what our family's giving. So that who's cutting the check? I mean, today it's it's not the same, obviously, but that was coming from him. But when it comes to the idea of uniting the community in an equal way, it's everybody gave the same exact thing: man, woman, child.
It's like the condo association.
My thoughts exactly.
Except the billionaire gets his name on the building.
You know something? We need billionaires too.
Mendy,
Huh?
Yeah.
Mendy, on the stones, so each tribe had their own stone and their own symbol on the stone.
Well, their own symbol. No, the symbol was on the banner. They had their own stone. They didn't have the symbol.
Oh,
Symbol's
okay.
on the banner.
Okay, so who determined the stone that they would get? Was that Hashem?
Yeah, that's explicitly in the Torah portion we read yesterday.
Okay, so, well, I read it at home, but I don't, would it be in the Torah portion, which,
We read yesterday. Yes.
right,
Yeah.
so it's, okay, well, I didn't have a pen, I didn't use a pen, but I wanted to write down which tribe got which stone, so I can find it in the Torah portion.
It's not going to be clear in Torah portion. The 12 stones are named there. It doesn't say explicitly which one got which. You have to follow it along because it says the different rows. It goes by row.
Okay. Otherwise, you read it from somewhere.
I made notes myself.
Oh, could you send that to us? Or to me?
Sure.
Okay.
As long as you don't mind the typos. Huh?
No, I don't mind.
No judging, no judging.
All right.
All right.
Have a great
Thank
week.
you.
Be well.
Thank you.
Great week,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a
Take
good
care.
week. Thank you.